As I mentioned, it's 1 o'clock. Roll call. Do we have Mr. Olds online?
Yes, I'm here.
Jason. Ms. Baldwin Day.
I'm present.
Mr. Downey.
Present.
Dr. Boland.
Happy to be here.
And we do have a quorum. We're staff or a full committee of 5. Can you help us out with the public involvement announcement, please, Aaron?
Of course, welcome to AMAT's Policy Committee. Public comments are welcome and encouraged with 3 minutes given to each speaker. After the committee discusses an item, members of the public will be invited to comment. Housekeeping items for virtual attendees, please keep your cameras off unless speaking. For those attending by phone, press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. I will note Lori, our note taker, is not here today, so please bear with staff in case we're a little slow in making sure we read back everything to you all as you do it. So thank you.
We're going to keep me on track with Robert's rules.
I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
We'll see.
You
I
know, but
apologize for any errors.
need all that if I can get. So, do we have approval of the agenda? We have a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Ms. Baldwin Day, seconded by Mr. Downey. Any changes proposed? Hearing none, are there any objections to adopting the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. On to item number 4, which are meeting minutes. So we have before us the minutes from June 26, 2025 and July 17th, 2025 for approval. Do I have a motion? So moved. By Dr. Boland.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Baldwin Day. Are there any changes or discussion on the minutes?
Bless you, bless you.
Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none. The June 26th and July 17th minutes are both approved. On to the action items. Action item 5A is the 23 to 26 funding program administrative modification number 3. You have a presentation.
Yes, it'll be me just really quickly. So admin mods are kind of a lower level for changes for the tip. So they don't meet the level of amendment. So they don't require 30-day. It just requires a technical advisory committee and policy committee review and approval. So they typically are smaller little changes that need to happen here and there. We have a few, and I'll go through them really quickly. In table 3, the non-motorized table, staff caught that there was an issue with the totals for the state and MOA match for the non-motorized project for pavement replacement. That's a technical error that we caught. Basically, the numbers in the actual table itself, the columns were correct. It just didn't add up correctly at the bottom. So we corrected that. There's no change to our overall fiscal constraint, and we don't have to make any changes to existing agreements or upcoming agreements. Everything was caught just in time. Table 7, there are 3 changes here for HSIP. The first is 5th Avenue, Concrete Street to Carluck Street, pedestrian improvements. They'd like to add a fund code, a new one we've never seen before, so I'll explain it in just a second. It's called HSIP penalty. And let me read you what the HSIP penalty is, once I can find my email. There was a little misunderstanding at the Technical Advisory Committee about what HSIP penalty was, so I want to correct the record here. And as I've been told by DOT, the penalty is due to the state's non-compliance with federal recommendations for open container laws and repeat offender drunk driving laws. These penalty funds must be allocated between the HSIP and Section 402 alcohol impaired driving programs. So it is HSIP penalty that is specific for drivers. We were mistakenly thinking it was for vulnerable road users, and that is not the case. So I just want to correct that as we go forward. So HSIP penalty is looking at being utilized for the 5th Avenue Concrete to Carluck Street. There's also a small increase for design in FY25, so the overall project cost increases by $575,000. Next change in the HSIP table, Anchorage flashing yellow arrow signal head display. This is changing the phasing plan from utilities and construction in 25 to design. Please note there are actually 2 projects for this. One is the design portion, and then the other is the utilities construction portion. So this is just matching it up to be like the work in 25 will be for design for this particular project. Update the funding code from categorical UNCAT 148 to HSIP penalty. And HSIP penalty does not require match. And that was confirmed as well by DOT. And so the funding amount that you see, the change there is just the removal of the match. The project is not getting cheaper. And then lastly, there's another project for HSIP. It's the Mountain View Drive safety improvements. The match was mistakenly shown as being all state match, but it is a Muni-owned facility. And part of the policies and procedures for DOT is that the match is required to be on a local, for a local road to be part of the local responsibility. I was told that it needs to be split between state and MOA for this particular project. That was part of the intergovernmental agreement. So it was already caught. So there's no changes that need to be made on that end other than just updating our TIP program. And lastly, NHS table, there was a request to change the fund code from National Highway Performance Program to Surface Transportation Block Grant. My understanding is this makes the program more flexible. NHPP funds can only be used on NHS facilities. So Surface Transportation Block Grant is allowed to be used on other facilities that are NHS. Change the funding phase from utilities construction to all phases, which is what we typically do when we want to basically do design, right away, utilities construction in 1 year or whatever the idea is there. It's pretty common for us to use all phases, so that's not anything new for us. And then update the project name to add 25 after the FY to match the project name. Those are the changes. The Technical Advisory Committee reviewed it and recommended approval to the Policy Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
I have a compliment and a question for DOT staff potentially. Compliment is, my understanding is that staff went above and beyond to get this Mountain View Drive safety project moving. I think, not that we should name names, but very appreciative to the staff who helped make that happen. I think my question would be for the Fifth Avenue project. It's Concrete Street to Carluck Street, which is about 2 blocks west of the new shelter. So I was curious if there was potential or what the costs would be to shift that project so that it was more adjacent to the shelter, which I think is at Fifth and Sitka.
We have anybody in the crowd that would take that? I mean, I guess I could. Anna's online. Anna Boson. Yeah, help us out, Anna, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you. Anna Boson, Regional Traffic and Safety Engineer. I did speak with the project manager for this project in advance of this topic being discussed. There's a number of problems that might delay the overall project being delivered if we were to extend the project limits to include that other segment. I can name a couple right now. Our environmental process would likely have to start over because we would be changing the boundary of it. The contract for public involvement has already been negotiated and executed with a consultant contractor, so we would have to amend that. And then just the characteristics of that segment, there doesn't have the same constraints as the original segment, which would have to then go through a reanalysis of the HSIP nomination itself. Not to say that it wouldn't be eligible, it's just that it would be some additional analysis for benefit cost, but the characteristics of that segment, it does have lighting where the original scoped project does not. It does have a signal that's closer at Concrete Street, which the original nomination did not. And then the median is and the right of way is very constrained in that area. So right now, design is still trying to find a solution that doesn't implement the cheese grater fencing situation. So we can't confirm right now what the design will be, but there's a potential that any solution, even for the Fifth Avenue of the Carluck section originally, may not be as visually desirable by the community. And so adding another segment of that further down and the termini would also be a concern as we get closer to the higher speed road. So then we're looking at crash cushions and other kind of roadside hardware compliance issues with the segment east of Concrete Street. So there's just a lot of moving pieces that we wouldn't be able to repackage into the existing HSIP project quickly.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Please. Yeah.
Ms. Boson, a follow-up question to that. So it looks like fiscal year 25, we're still in design. Do you have any idea when this project might actually move into construction?
Yeah, thank you. I would say we have this coming year to go through preliminary design, public involvement, depending on the feedback and that process of engaging with a solution for that. My earliest guess would be 27. But I can, during this meeting, I can get back to you and check back with the project manager.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just thinking that the shelter site that's being considered as a, I don't think that's intended to be a long-term shelter site. Mr. Downey can feel free to correct me if I'm mistaken in that. But I'm just thinking about the timeline of when that shelter might be spinning down versus when this project might actually be occurring. And it might sort of be a moot point, depending on how that all aligns. So yeah, just thinking about congruence. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the committee? Not hearing any. Are there any comments from the public?
On there.
And we have someone online.
We do have somebody online, Luke Boland.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Luke. You have 3 minutes to speak, Luke, and identify yourself, please.
Hi, Luke Bond, Central Region DOT Pre-Construction Engineer. I was just going to follow up to the question asked of Anna. The Fifth Avenue Concrete Street to Carlip Street pedestrian improvements is looking at being ready to advance to construction funding in approximately a year from now, which would lead to construction in 2027. So this assumption is correct. Thanks.
So we have anybody else online? No. How about Sean?
Sure. Sean Baskey, Highway Design Chief for DOT. Just another point, the environmental document, really the scope setting portion of the project, HSIP projects, they're initially scoped way in advance. And then the environmental document got done in 2022. So, you know, just from a project management standpoint, it's really difficult to go back and reset limits, especially under the federal process. You basically set the limits of your project initially, and then if you ever expand that, the federal NEPA process doesn't really allow you to, because you never originally evaluated that section. And so, although it may seem like just an addition of another block or two, unless we set those limits early on, then it's really difficult to add it. Not that it's not possible, you just have to restart the entire NEPA process.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, I'm not seeing any, so I can read that action again. The action is the Technical Advisory Committee reviewed admin mod number 3 of the funding program and recommends approval to the policy committee. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
By Mr. Downey, seconded by Ms. Baldwin Day. I think I'll go to, are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Approved admin mod number 3. On to action item 5B, which is the 2025 public participation plan.
This will be Christine Schutte.
Okay.
Thanks. We want to thank everybody who commented on this plan. This is about an update to our plan that's about 10 years old. We tried to make it clearer, use more plain language, and just to reiterate a few of the comments we got, we received 36 comments on the plan. A lot of them were to bring some information up to that summary section where this is AMETS, just so that people get a clear image of who AMETS is right in that first section. There is some comments about clarifying some of the language and performance measures, And then a series of comments were just about making some graphics clear and easier to follow. We did have one comment about saying more in our public response table. So when you see each of the comments, staff tried to elaborate in that section on if we did make changes, what changes could we make? And if we weren't recommending changes at this time, why we weren't recommending them. So we hope that helps commenters feel that their requests are heard and acknowledged and a path is paved forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Does the committee have any questions or comments for Christine?
Well, I'll agree with Rabbit Creek Community Council and say, thank you for increasing lay language and reducing acronyms.
Anybody else?
Just would love to acknowledge how much work goes into pulling this together, especially after a 10-year hiatus, not having to like update the document. So thank you for doing this work.
Are there any comments from the public? Seeing any? What's the will of the committee? I could read that action again if you'd like. Maybe I can.
It's to approve the public participation plan with the edits outlined in the memo and the comment response summary.
Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
I have a second. Moved by Mr. Johnny, seconded by Ms. Baldwin-Day. There any objections to approving the motion?
I don't have an objection, but I do have something to add to discussion.
Okay.
Just because Mr. Downey gave Rabbit Creek Community Council a shout out. I have to disagree with them on one point. They make a comment that says that sending outreach materials to underserved individuals doesn't seem promising. And then they seem to argue that it's more effective to reach out through community groups. And they say that this includes community councils. So my experience is that community councils are not often representative of the wider community and particularly underserved individuals or diverse audiences. I think we often see a certain demographic that is represented primarily by community councils. So I just want to, as we move forward in this process, voice my strong support for AMATS doing whatever it can to engage folks to be part of this public process who may not engage in community councils or other community groups. I think when we try to make efforts to be inclusive and cast the widest net possible, I think that is a benefit to us and to informing this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Baldwin. Any other discussion? Move to, are there any objections to approving the motion? I'm not hearing any, so the motion is approved. On to item 5C. Thank you, Christine. Which is the high crash network map that Emily is presenting.
Hello, everyone. Emily Weiser. I'm the non-motorized planner at AMATS, also taking the lead on our safety-related initiatives. So a lot of this will look familiar to you. We brought this to you last month in a draft form as kind of a heads up that we were working on this, and we bring it back to you to consider as the AMATS High Crash Network. So this, just to recap a little bit, this was sparked by the fact that we have multiple safety initiatives across multiple agencies. They all produce a slightly different map that have some commonalities but are not identical. So we took this effort to piece together those maps essentially and say, here's the complete high crash network in the AMATS area. So all of these, and look, if you want to maybe show the map on the screen. Sorry, I'm keeping track here. So the corridors on the screen are in orange, and then we have some hotspots in red. The hotspots were analyzed by the last AMATS safety plan, And that is where there have been at least 70 crashes of all types in a 5-year period that plan analyzed. And then the corridors come from multiple plans that identified roads where there are high crash rates and or high injury rates and or high vulnerable road user crashes and fatalities. All of these sources spanned, the data that they use span 2016 to 2022, kind of variably. Usually they're using a 5-year period within there. So this is the map. You've seen this before. It's maybe a little bit cleaned up since then. But this is what we're suggesting could be the AMATS high crash network. Last month, you all and the technical advisory committee brought up the suggestion of kind of digging into the details of what's happening at these locations. So since then, we've prepared a table that's also in your materials for it's showing the corridors. So each corridor has a row in the table. It's got some details, thank you, in terms of some conditions on the corridor, what types of crashes are the most common there, and how many fatalities and serious injuries have occurred on those corridors. So this table focuses on fatalities and serious injuries. The map, at least some sources that fed into that map, we're looking at all crash types, but we had some feedback focusing on the serious crashes would be of interest. So that's what this table focuses on. This table is also using the full data set that is available from DOT, which is 2013 to 2024. So that is a longer time period and also more recent than what went into that map. Just looking at using as much data as we have available and the most recent years that are available. So this table we're considering to be kind of supporting data that could be useful as we're looking at the high crash network map. We're not suggesting that the committee adopt the table as AMATS materials just because it really is just data. It's just showing numbers. And it may be that if a project comes along and wants to address one of these corridors, they're going to do their own data analysis that's going to be much more in depth. But this can just provide an idea of sort of where the fatalities and serious injuries are occurring, what types of crashes, is it pedestrian or car related? And then this table does also rank the corridors by the number of fatal and serious crashes per mile. Since the corridors are different lengths, we sort of normalized it by mile. So if you guys want to adopt the map as the AMATS high crash network, we're envisioning that informing AMATS processes for project selection and scoping. We've talked to the MOA traffic department about potentially it could be useful for their annual summaries of crash data. It'll be available to other agencies and to the public. Nobody else has any obligation to use the map, but it will be available in case it's useful for them. And then our intention is with the next safety plan update, which we are starting to think about drafting that scope of work. So it's coming up, relatively soon in the grand scheme of things. We're intending to take some feedback and maybe some lessons learned from how useful this map ends up being, and then do a more robust reanalysis with the safety plan update, really looking at different crash types and changes over time and factors that are underlying those crashes. Also working with the DOT and the MOA so that it's all mutually beneficial and we're pulling in all the relevant analyses and information, and the HSIP process is really robust, so we might be able to learn some things from that, and so forth. So we have the map before you today, and I believe the suggested action is to adopt that as the AMATS high crash network until the completion of the next AMATS safety plan, and I'd be happy to take any questions in the meantime.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any comments or questions from the committee?
I have a comment that this table is actually extraordinarily helpful, and I think there's a lot to be mined from this particular arrangement of the data. So thank you for taking the time to put that together. I realize that we're not recommending adoption of this as part of AMATS materials, but I see quite a bit of utility for this as we're thinking about how to improve safety on our road system in Anchorage. So thanks for doing that additional work. And yeah, everything that went into compiling the data to create this map. Just much appreciated. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, Dr. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. I also find this table very helpful. I'd be interested to see one other column sort of identifying which of these are municipal roads and which of these are state roads. I think that'd be helpful to have as part of this table. I guess I maybe would want to hear a little bit more rationale of why not attach this table formally to the map and have both be adopted, or at least have this table as a supplementary memo to the adopted map. I think that might be really helpful. So is there a reason that staff doesn't think that the table should move forward as part of it?
I think we're not opposed to that. I'll let Aaron say otherwise if he has strong feelings. But the table, since there's nothing really policy related in there, it really is just data. The data are already, I believe, publicly available, either through DOT or MOA in other formats. And so it's maybe not something AMATS needs to adopt per se, because it's just kind of, here's some data, here's some facts, rather than an AMATS policy. But I do see your point about maybe providing it supporting information. We can talk about whether we want that on the website, where we post the map. Yeah.
So can I follow up? Answer, sure. Yeah, I guess I think it's a lot. This may be publicly available elsewhere, but I think it's a lot for maybe like members of the public to piece this stuff together, or frankly, even policymakers. And it's, I think, presented here very, very well. And so the goal of this action, as I understand it, is to inform the safety plan. But I guess where I would find this information really helpful too is as we're preparing, I think this is an agenda topic later in this meeting, but as we're gearing up for, the future bid process, as a member of the policy committee, I'm looking at these roads and I'm thinking, okay, well, how can we prioritize roads that are on the high crash network for timeline and funding when it comes to the next tip? And so I would like to have a record of this data sort of feed into those decision-making processes. So I guess the question is, how can this map and the data that we have, is there a way that it can be instructive not only to the upcoming safety plan, but to other planning documents?
That's a fair point. And yeah, that is information that's not immediately apparent on the map, but is apparent on the table and could be used for informing that project selection. So
Okay.
I see your point.
Real quick. So the intent with this map was to use it for all of our processes moving forward. So the MTP update that's coming along, the TIP, the 27 through 30, staff's already drafting that to bring it to the work session. So, and we'll talk about how that was used to inform some recommendations that staff has on there. So we'll be bringing it, the data exists whether you adopt it or not. So we're not trying to say your opinion doesn't matter. If you don't adopt it, then we'll note that at the meeting as well. But it is something that we can use for everything if you guys do adopt it.
I think maybe the distinction was between the map informing those processes versus the table informing those processes. Is that what you're getting at? Like, you'd like to have a table available to inform that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both.
I think the problem with the table is it's using different years than the map.
It is.
So
It's a little bit to explain.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it would be useful to have the table available either way, whether or not it's adopted. We can discuss if that's appropriate. But
I mean, the big thing to recognize is that when people look at the map, they're going to be like, I want to go to this particular spot on the map and see what the most common and second most common types are. If those two match up accurately, we now have kind of conflicting data between the two. Because somebody may look at it and be like, oh, this table says it's pedestrian is the most common type. But maybe it became the most common type because of the new data that was added as part of the table versus what the map says. Or maybe something has changed because the map is using older data. Like that's the fear of why we want to kind of keep them separate, is that the map is what we adopt because that's what's in our plans and everything like that. The table is really just an example of what we can start moving forward to in the future to use with the map as we develop them in conjunction to each other.
just say if we look only at the data that are used in the map, which does span, I think, 7 years across all the sources, and we make a table with that, it looks almost identical to this table. So it's not like there's huge changes over time or as you expand the years.
The
But yeah,
map is 2017 to 21, right?
The map is, it depends on the source. So there's 4 sources that go into the map and they span 2016 to 22,
Okay,
each, kind of jigsawed together.
whereas the table is 2013 to 2024, so kind of just a little bit longer
Yeah, it's
on both
a
sides.
couple of years on both sides.
So what would it take to make the table? I mean, would that be a huge lift to make the table the same year set as the map?
We can make the table the same year set as the map. It might be there's still the caveat of the 4 different sources use different years that go into the map. So it may not match exactly, but also the map isn't communicating numbers or even rank
That's the tricky part.
priorities. So I don't think there's any inherent disagreement between the two, other than the fact that we haven't shown the hotspots in the table. It's the corridors that are in the table, because hotspots, they're a relatively small area. And so when you're looking only at fatalities and serious injuries, you end up with not very many data points to work with.
Can I ask one last question, Mr. Chair? Procedurally through our AMATS process, let's say today we took action on the map. What would it look like? Is there opportunity to bring forward the table and to adopt that if we don't do it today? At like the next meeting or an action item, or what needs to happen for that?
I guess I maybe if I can ask also a follow-up question, if that's all right.
Mhm.
That what practical impact adopting the table would have on, for example, the upcoming TIP and MTP versus just having it as a publicly available document on the website?
It wouldn't really have any effect because the map shows us the areas which kind of line up with the table. The table is just to provide you like, well, what's happening at that specific location? Is it like angle or pedestrian crashes? So it could help us with what project we select in terms of what we put in there for the scope of the project. So I guess in that regard, it would have some effect. Sorry, as I'm kind of talking out loud, I'm like, actually, it would have some benefit to us. But I'll be honest with you, it doesn't really matter if you adopt the table or not. That data exists, and we would use that data regardless. So the reason the map is being asked to be adopted is because we're like, we don't have anything currently right now other than what's in our safety plan. We kind of wanted to bring all the sources together in this one map to be like, as we start looking at our next MTP and TIP update, start thinking about these locations that all these different sources are calling for us. So from a staff perspective, it doesn't really matter if you adopt the table or not, I guess.
So the map's a snapshot in time. It's not a living document. Is that true?
True.
And so is some of this data, well, I guess I would call it accurate, but is it incomplete? If we're looking at the table, I mean,
Table, so I believe there was an asterisk on the 2024 serious injuries and fatalities, and that was that it hasn't quite been certified yet, at least as of a few weeks ago, which means there could be 1 or 2 little changes in that data set as it's sort of quality checked.
Yeah.
But the staff I spoke with and got the data from said, go ahead and use it. It's fine to use. Just stay tuned in case there's any changes.
other questions for Emily from the committee? Okay, I think we can move on to, if there are any questions or comments, I should say, from the public. Mr. Basky.
Yeah, Sean Baskey, head of the highway design section for DOT. When I look at that, the next thing I start thinking about is potentially how you use that to guide, project selection and other things. So a bunch of us were on the project scoring teams coming out of the MTP. And so, all the projects were nominated, and then, there's criteria and scoring criteria that are set by the policy committee. And, is it in this boundary? Is it, then you get 2 points or 3 points or 4 points, right? And so maybe that helps guide how, I mean, it's good information for projects to have, or that projects are already in the system, you know, where you might want to focus some efforts, but then it's, you know, how does that guide that next set of projects that are nominated by the community or selected by the policy committee? So we went through, I don't know, it was somewhere around 200, 300 projects, scored all of them on the pathway and roadway side of things. And so it's just another opportunity to get that through.
Thanks. Mr. Coy.
Yeah, so Brad Coy, municipal traffic engineer. One thing that we're really excited about this is that we do an annual report every year. And in the annual report, knowing these locations, it's something that we could consider having new data in our report that says, here's what all the data that we have for the year that we're analyzing. So kind of along the same line of what you probably got from my staff, the 2024 information I'm expecting. So in a year, we'll have new data and it'll be new insights. So for us, we view the table as going to be constantly getting updated with new information, new insights. As projects are getting evaluated, we'll look at latest data, we'll look at the current things that are happening. So all of those things are like constantly moving, but having a map of the boundaries makes it very clear these are the locations that we are like emphasizing. And so we do plan to use the map as a guide for what we do at the Traffic Engineering Department. And the data is something that will continually be able to provide updates. So thinking about this adoption, right now it's to get us to the next safety plan, where it will be a map and it will be an analysis and it will be, I think the vision is to have it, like have that analysis to identify priorities and to get more in depth with what this data means and what the recommendations are, kind of all of that breadth. Whereas right now, it's, in my mind, the map really does it for us. It doesn't need to be as much more than that to accomplish what I see that we're doing.
Thanks, Brad. Any other comments?
I think my thought, as I'm looking at the table versus the map is that, oh, sorry, excuse me.
So
Go ahead.
we can
Community member comments. Is there anybody online?
Anyone online?
Nobody's raised their hand online.
no. I could probably just let Ms. Baldwin Day make her comment, or should I?
We need a motion on the table and then you guys can discuss more.
What is the will of the committee? And the action is the technical advisory committee has reviewed the attached map and recommends the policy committee adopt it as AMET's high crash network to remain in effect until the next AMAT safety plan is updated.
I would move to adopt the attached map as the AMAT's high crash network to remain in effect until the next AMAT's safety plan update is completed.
Moved by Mr. Downey. Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Baldwin Day. Their discussion.
Yeah, I have I think a follow-up question, because I do think that part of what is helpful about, I think I have a question about how to get some of this table information incorporated somehow, because I think that and perhaps I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, Mr. Young and Alan, but I think part of what's helpful with the policy guidance here is actually the type of crash that's occurring, and the sort of the ranking, as it were. I mean, that feels really important. You know, I mean, yes, the map itself gives us a very clear picture of where the high crashes are areas are, but it's not telling us what those crashes are. And the intervention, it seems to me, would be predicated on the type of the crash, or like taking into account whether something is a front to front collision versus an angle collision or a pedestrian collision. Seems to be sort of important to also use as policy guidance. So I absolutely want to move forward with approving the map as the high crash network. I think I'm just interested in how the rest of this really important data gets incorporated into policy guidance moving forward. And you know, again, perhaps I misunderstood you, Mr. Jongenelen, and how you were talking about that happening. But I think for purposes of the policy committee, continuing to have this kind of information in front of us feels very important. And I don't really know the mechanics by which that would happen.
Do you want to take this or?
How do we keep this information in front of us and the map being an illustration, this being more practical policy guidance?
I think, so I have two thoughts. One to most directly answer your question is there's certainly space and opportunity and almost a certainty that these data will be looked at or evaluated or referenced when developing the scope of a project. I think that is perfectly reasonable, and or you guys could direct us to do that if you want to make absolutely sure. My other thought is maybe more of a caveat where, so yes, this table talks about the most common crash type on Tutor, for example. Tutor is huge, and we're not going to have a project most likely that covers the whole expanse of Tutor. And so if there is a project nominated or being considered on some part of Tutor, I would suggest don't rely on this table for the whole corridor, but instead go back to the data and say, what is the most common crash type? So I think it's inevitable that we will go back to the data regardless of this table. The table is maybe a starting point that could start some conversations or considerations about what projects.
Okay.
Considered. And if Aaron has anything to add.
I think that's fine.
I guess, you know, to build on that, obviously this table now exists as part of these meeting minutes. Will it exist anywhere else that's accessible to the public and the policy committee?
That's maybe a conversation to have. I'm not sure if we have a policy about, do we ever post things that have not been approved or adopted? Could it be a supplement to the approved adopted map on our website, or no?
I mean, if it's something that we want living on a regular basis, it's hard because a lot of the data is already provided to us from other sources. So it's not like we're recreating anything. We're just putting it into a table format. So I don't know if we necessarily need a formal approval or blessing from you guys, other than to say, start putting this table on our website on a regular basis and update it every year or something like that. A lot of that we were trying to wait for the next safety plan to figure out what we want to do. And that this was really just a starting point down the road until we got to our safety plan. So if you guys have directions now where you want us to go, then let us know and we'll do it. Dr. Wall?
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. You know, the table is information that I asked for at the last meeting. And honestly, without some version of this table moving forward along with the map, I'm unlikely to support the adoption of the map today. I look at this map and it doesn't really tell me anything. It is divorced from any other context. It doesn't tell, you know, to Member Baldwin Day's point, it doesn't tell us what type of collisions. It doesn't tell us how many collisions. There's not a ranking. You know, it doesn't even really define high crash corridors versus high crash hotspots. It doesn't give me really much valuable information as a decision-making guide, or even a decision-making ingredient as a policymaker. I want to know what types of crashes, how many are happening on these roads, who owns these roads. And that is the information I think would be valuable for me when it comes to informing our next short range and long-term transportation plans.
I would like to amend the motion to include this table publicly alongside the high crash network map.
Second.
So the motion is to include the data along with the map, again, as a snapshot in time. By,
And until, let's see, what is it? What was the, until the language? Thank you. Yes. Until the next safety plan update.
moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion on that? So we have numbers of crashes and locations. And I think Dr. Boland recommended adding the column for the ownership of the road. Do the crash rates? Seems like they would have some significance too, if you're selecting or identifying your problem spots. Do we have that information?
Rates per,
Whether it's per traffic or, the pedestrians might be a little bit harder because we don't really have those
Yeah.
counts, but.
yeah, I just showed the number of serious crashes per mile. That's how they're ranked. If there's another rate we want to look at, we certainly could.
I think this is really like digestible for the public, which I think is also a consideration is, I mean, as you pointed out, Mr. Young and Ellen, that this is coming from multiple data sources, but giving the public a consolidated view feels really important for transparency purposes. So yeah, I really feel that having this as a snapshot, this is 2013 to 2024, perhaps with whatever caveats need to be made relative to the timeline of what's reflected in the map. It feels important that this gives context for what we're seeing in the map itself.
Any other comments? So I think we're going to, should vote on the amendment first.
Yep.
Well, are there any objections to approving the amendment to the motion, which does include the data table with the map? I think that's it, right?
Yep.
Are there any objections to that amendment? I'm not hearing any, so the motion as amended is to recommend approval of the map with the data table. For what? For approval.
The map and the table to remain into effect until the next safety plan is updated.
There you go. Thank you. And are there any objections to approving that motion? So not hearing any, so that's approved. I think we're on to action item 5D. Thank you, Alan. Which is the AMAT's TIP amendment number 4 project request. Karen has a presentation.
Yeah, just a real quick one. So at the assembly meeting on July 29th, AMAT staff was asked whether the project description for the Dale Folker Street upgrade and the TIP included evaluating the intersections of both Tudor Road. The project description does not specifically mention the intersection or the evaluation of that intersection as part of it. So the request is made for AMATs to consider updating the project description in the next TIP amendment to include an evaluation of the intersections of Tudor and Dale and Tudor and Folker at the next available meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Committee. So an example of this would be evaluating the intersection for the additional crossing opportunities. Good example would be maybe there's an opportunity to add a new signal at Tudor and Folker or something like that. So we're not specifying what the improvements need to be, just that an evaluation needs to be done as part of the project. So the Technical Advisory Committee reviewed this and recommended approval. This is something that would need to be done as part of the next amendment. So this item is before you today for approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Any comments or questions from the committee? Are we talking about a scope change that carries any budget with it, or?
I asked, and at this time, no, there's no budget change to this. It would fit in with the project because the project's just getting started.
I feel like there's an HSIP nomination for maybe Wright and Dale, those intersections with Tudor.
Yes,
Yeah,
we did
so-
submit those, yes.
Okay, so we'll just want to make sure
And
those get accepted or that we won't double up that work, but I think that's easy to
Yeah, so
coordinate
the
as we look at projects. Yeah.
big thing for this is if you guys do recommend this as part of it and the description gets changed, it doesn't require the project to pay for it. Say, for example, the HSIP nomination gets approved and that can bring money to add to this project. So it's a way to help with cost savings and or just making sure everything's on alignment. So we'll keep an eye on that between the different organizations and make sure we're working together on it.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Hearing none, any comments from the public? Not seeing any. What's the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Oh, it looks like we might have a hand online.
Oh,
Looks like we had a hand raised. Anna Boson.
Yeah, sorry, just wanted to confirm that this request came through via coordination efforts between or among AMAT's city and DOT staff while we were drafting the HSIP nominations for Tudor Road.
thanks, Ann. I think we can stick with the motions moved by Ms. Baldwin Day and seconded by Dr. Bowen. There any objections to approving the motion? Not hearing any, the motion is approved. We're on to action item 5E, which is the policy committee working session on the operating agreement and the boundary changes agenda.
Just real quick intro on this one. So I was requested by the policy committee chair to add an item to the agenda for the PC to set the agenda for the next work session. For the work session we have scheduled for the operating agreement at Boundary on Monday. And staff put together this memo just to give you guys talking points, just so you know, this is not us saying this is what the agenda needs to be. It's just based on the discussion that happened in March of 2025 at the PC. There are 7 questions that were asked at that time, and so we've outlined them here. Should the letter from DOT requesting the changes to our operating agreement at Boundary be reviewed by outside legal counsel, which was recommended by the technical advisory committee? You know, what items should be specifically reviewed? What is the scope of work for the legal counsel to comment on? You know, are there other things that you wanted added in to be looked at the same time? What's going to come back to the PC? Will it be a legal opinion or just a briefing? How will Muni and DOT legal, it's not legally, Muni and DOT legal be involved? There was some discussion about getting a letter from DOT legal and getting a letter from Muni legal, or having those 2 groups look at it as well. And then who will provide the response to the PC? There was some comments about not wanting to put me in the role of trying to summarize a legal opinion to you all. And then how will the PC respond after the legal review is done and provided? So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Is there any questions or comments from the committee?
Sure, I have a question.
Cool.
So thank you, Aaron, for sending out again the survey times for the work session. If a work session is held, I plan on attending. But I guess my question is, you know, what if the policy committee just were to decide not to go through this exercise of having the work session and opening up the operating agreement? You know, the majority of the policy committee just saying, no, we're not going to have this conversation.
Well, I have not been informed by FHWA of any implications, aside from the fact that while our boundary is not updated, we cannot spend our MPO funding, that's the TIP funding and the UPW funding, within the areas that are outside our boundary. So, for example, there's a portion of the Glen Highway, half of the Glen Highway is not included in our current boundary. We would not be able to spend our MPO funding on the eastern half of the Glen Highway, but we could on the western half. Same with the small portion of the Seward Highway that was added as part of your guys' approval of the boundary. We couldn't spend it in that location. There's some other small hotspots as well. I've asked and still haven't received anything at this point of any ramifications if we don't get the boundary approved in time. The boundary needs to be approved by December of 2026, towards the end of December of 2026. So at this time, there's nothing hanging over us on that regard.
Can you walk us through briefly what it takes for the boundary to be approved?
Yes, so the boundary was already approved by the policy committee back in August of 2024, which is when we sent it to DOT. Technically, DOT is not part of the approval process as outlined in the operating agreement and federal regulations. It's actually the governor that approves the boundary. But once the governor approves it, it then goes to FHWA for incorporation into their system.
So kind of just summarize back to make sure I understand.
Mhm.
Policy committee has approved our boundaries. Essentially, that's like a formal proposal from us. The governor has to essentially ratify that. If he doesn't, then are we still kind of operating in our existing boundary? So we can still do all the other projects, just minus sort of the additions that you just described.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And could I,
Yeah, please.
is the governor's authority to not sign the boundary agreement an active legal question?
I don't really know, because in federal regulations, it specifically says that it has to be approved by the boundary. FHWA, the governor has to approve the boundary. I was thinking ahead. FHWA has commented a couple times, they don't really need formal approval from the governor, so there seems to be some kind of disagreement there about whether they need formal approval for the governor or not.
Yeah, I guess maybe it'd be good to get clarification from the federal government about that. But I think my sense that the legal question we're actually answering here is about AMAT's authority over National Highway System roads within the boundary is actually the question at issue.
That's the crux.
Yeah.
At that March meeting, you said that the MOA attorney had reviewed the letter and was putting together an opinion. Have they finished that? Or?
No, part of the discussion at that meeting was whether or not you wanted to have the Muni legal team review it or not. And that wasn't answered. I have sent it over to Muni Legal. I'm not sure if they've fully reviewed it or not, but I think that needs to be part of the discussion at the agenda is if you want to get a formal legal opinion from the Muni's legal team, and then do you want a formal legal opinion from the DOT's legal team? What do you guys want?
My understanding is that Municipal Attorney Eva Garner will be present at our meeting on Monday.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's a legal opinion from the municipal attorney to the policy committee,
Yes.
because, I'm just gonna like put this out there for the conversation. My understanding is that independent of AMAPs, members of the administration who work for the mayor and assembly members can make the same request to the municipal attorney. We don't have to go through the policy committee to get the legal briefing. So I just want to, I guess, say that, when it comes to this idea of having this work session and going through this exercise that, we can have the municipal attorney weigh in as for us as decision makers, whether or not we go through this whole thing. Give another comment.
What do we want to do? Public comment? No.
Oh, we could. Why wouldn't we want to answer that question?
Answer the question.
Answer the question of whether the MPO has authority over the I think it's projects of regional significance. Why wouldn't we want to answer that question?
Well, I mean, are you going to just take the municipal attorney's word? I mean, what does answering the question look like for you, I guess?
That's part of getting an independent review of the issues that we have. Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know if it's a decision of is it a decision of the policy committee? What does the decision point look like for DOT, I guess is my question. We have the work session. Are you committing to honor the decision of the analysis of independent counsel?
No. Well, and I think that's probably part of the conversation on Monday is how are we gonna adjudicate a difference in opinion?
Mhm. Yeah, if I could, I think we should add that as an item to the agenda. We can get to that when we have a motion, but I think figuring out whether we need a third party person or third party law firm to assess it, whether we'd just like to have a conversation between the Department of Law and municipal attorney's office, and what would there be any binding outcome to that? I feel like those are all things we should absolutely discuss on Monday.
Any other comments, questions?
So the question before us here is really the agenda for the work session, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And I think I've heard an addition of how both Muni Legal and the Department of Law would ostensibly be involved in what we might expect from them. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And then I think I heard a further item, which was how will we adjudicate a difference of opinion?
Mhm.
Okay.
That might be covered by number 7. How will the policy committee respond after the legal review is done and provided?
Okay. Mr. Young and Allen, if we retain legal counsel, outside legal counsel, who pays for that?
Well, that's part of what has to be discussed, and that's what the Muni legal team is looking at, is whether or not we as AMATs can actually get outside legal counsel. Because we are part of the municipality of Anchorage, so who is the client, the municipality of Anchorage or AMATs? The idea is AMATs would pay for the legal review. I will let you know when this came forward to you back in March, AMATs had a lot of money in the current UPWP. As of right now, we do not have a lot of extra money in the upcoming UPWP because we are fully staffed. So just want to point out that we have a funding concern to think about, depending on how long you guys want to have this legal review done and all the things that you want to include into it. I don't know how much it's going to cost. There may be opportunity for other funding, but the idea was to have AMATs pay for the legal review.
The budget in March was 10 to 15, right?
10 to 15,000.
1,000.
I think it was pretty cheap, but I don't know what you guys want to add to that legal review. So, and if you want back and forth with the attorneys and have them come here in person, or if you want them on the phone, like that could get more expensive, is all I'm just kind of saying.
It could be iterative decisions too, I suppose.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? Any comments from the public?
I think you were pretty quickly that public, so I was just contemplating. Okay.
Yeah, are we ready for a motion? What's the will of the committee?
I move to postpone this. I know we did the Google Doodle poll, whatever it is. From what I'm hearing, I'm just not sure. I'm less convinced now after that prior conversation that this is worth going through. So I would like the opportunity to have a conversation with this role attorney to get their take on, is this even something of value? And so I want to postpone this until our next meeting, this decision, fully understanding that would push the work session out further.
Move to postpone. Do I hear a second to that?
I will second for purposes of discussion.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, I mean, I just think, if I could speak to the motion,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. I'm hearing that even having this independent legal counsel may not cause us to arrive at consensus as a policy committee. So I could envision potential legal action between parties who seem averse right now, even beyond us receiving that counsel. I'm weighing the fact that we have an entire municipal attorney's office is a resource to at least 3 of the members on the policy committee. And, you know, acknowledging the limited resources that AMATS has to bring on independent counsel. And I just think it's going to be very difficult for any one person to advise both. I mean, I think we have seen, sometimes it's even difficult for the municipal attorney to, you know, depending on who they are and who's elected, to advise both the assembly and the administration, right? And so now we're saying legal counsel arriving, you know, doing an analysis on behalf of who's paying for it, who is the client, right? And still not knowing whether that will be binding. It sounds like it won't be. So this all to me is just kind of seeming like money and effort and time of municipal staff, state staff, policymakers, for something that may in the end not be very productive.
Other comments? I don't know.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it takes a long time. I mean, it's taken us since April to put this together, so, I mean, I'm gonna vote against postponing it. I think we should go through and have that conversation. I think there's other parts of the operating agreement that we should open up to, just to, I mean, this is the most important question that we have in my mind, but there's other things that we probably should address. You know, more minor things are the makeup of this committee is one, you know, and there's a long list of them, and we probably don't want to get into them right now, but how the 3C process is implemented, things like that. So I suppose I'm not opposed to like modifying the agenda here, but it took us how many months 4 months to get an hour and a half on the calendar. So I feel pretty strongly that we should move forward and have a conversation. And the outcome of that meeting on Monday could be that we don't hire the outside review. But yeah, I feel pretty strongly that we should keep it.
Will there be representatives from the state DOL at our work session?
If there's gonna be representatives from the MOA legal, then certainly I wouldn't have it without them, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, so I think I think that at least in the last 15 minutes, it really feels like the stakes of this conversation just changed in my mind. And you know, if we're talking about involving legal counsel for the municipality and also the state and potentially outside legal counsel, it feels really important to me anyway to have an opportunity to discuss this issue in confidence with Muni Legal in advance of a public work session, to be able to really understand more fully the scope of the conversation that we are both obligated to have, and then might also have in addition, as you just alluded to, and to do that as I said, in confidence, as opposed to in the public view. So I think I would be open to postponing this particular item until our next meeting, predicated on agreement informally among the members of the policy committee that we would go ahead and set another work session option, and that we would take the time in the interim to consult with Muni Legal and really understand more fully what ought to be on the table, at least from the municipality's perspective and from the assembly's perspective in a work session like this.
And I guess my point of frustration is that this has been a topic since the February letter. It's been a topic since our March policy committee meeting. And
you can blame it on me. I'm since June.
Yeah, I think
Please.
Yeah, I think I'm also inclined to oppose the motion, that we should have this meeting on Monday and have an opportunity to answer the questions that you're raising. We should, and I think we can talk more about this when we get to the main motion. about what the agenda would be, but I think the question of should we hire outside counsel, what are the legal questions, how far apart are we? I think that's a really useful conversation to have sooner than later, and yeah, I'd like to have that conversation.
Any other discussion on the motion, please, Dr. Wall?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say I'm fine with our operating agreement. It's good. I think the governor wants to approve the boundaries. Great. We want to keep working within our existing boundaries. I'm okay with that too. I'm not interested in changing up the makeup of the policy committee and giving the governor more purview and more seats on the body. Yeah, I think we've got a great operating agreement, and I really think the end point of all of this process, I'll be surprised if if either entity wants to have their attorneys assert otherwise, then they can do so. I don't, clearly we have a difference of opinion or difference of interpretation, the state versus the municipality, and I see this as honestly a power move from the state to try to assert more authority over which projects get done within the boundaries and who gets a seat at the table for decision making and policy making. And I'm increasingly wary of going into this conversation, given what we've heard in terms of, how will this potentially lead to an outcome that both entities are going to honor? It sounds like, probably not going to get there. So I don't know.
If I might.
Please.
Yeah, I think for me, the primary legal question that we do need an urgent answer to is authority over NHS roads. I think, we've seen recent examples where DOT made decisions to not proceed with lane drops on projects that have been approved by the AMATS policy committee. I think my position is that AMATS has authority over AMATS projects, and there shouldn't be unilateral decisions by AKDOT. And I think that's where we might have a disagreement, or we might not. And I think I'd like to explore that. And I think that gives me some urgency to have this conversation sooner than later. I do not see this as an attempt by DOT to change the operating agreement. I think the central legal question we need to answer is that about authority over AMATS roads. And I am eager to resolve that.
May I ask a clarifying question? Who is the operating agreement among? Who are the parties?
It's actually between the governor and the mayor at this point. Now, we are grandfathered in. So should we update our operating agreement, makeup of our policy committee, or change the authority or power of is there specific ramifications if you change the makeup of your policy committee? You have to redesignate. If we redesignate as an MPO, that requires us to update to current federal regulations on the makeup of the policy committee, which means we have to add providers of public transportation to our board at a minimum. If you add more than that, that's fine, but at a minimum. So we would have to at least add, I believe, the railroad and the public transportation department to our board. And then it would be an agreement between all those parties. But right now, it's currently the governor and the mayor of Anchorage.
I can't remember if Tony Knowles was the mayor or the governor when he signed that agreement.
It was like 2003. So it's not that old.
Yeah.
So right now, the main motion is to set the agenda for the AMATS work session on the operating agreement and boundary changes, which is not the same as the question that you just articulated, Mr. Downey. It feels like we're talking about three different things. We're talking about whether or not AMATS has jurisdiction over all federally funded projects in our area, there's also a question that's been raised about the boundary changes and also the operating agreement. And so that's really big. That's a really big conversation for a work session. And I think your point is well made, Mr. Downey, that resolving the question of jurisdiction is important. And I think that question could be resolved independently of operating agreement and boundary changes. So I think I would potentially be open to a narrowed work session on that specific question. And the operating agreement and boundary changes can be a separate conversation at another time. But the more immediate and the most pressing question that's been identified could be the focus of the work session.
how do you memorialize that without modifying the operating agreement?
I think that's to be determined in the work session.
By mine.
Please.
So the action here is setting the agenda for the work session. And it says AMAP's work session on the operating agreement and boundary changes. It sounds like what member Baldwin Day is suggesting with the AMAP's work session, that language be amended so that we are actually setting the agenda for an AMAP's work session on jurisdiction over NHS projects. And from there, can look at these proposed agenda items and decide whether or not they should be included in the work session, a work session on jurisdiction over NHS projects within the AMAP's boundary. So without getting to the specific topics yet, I think I will make that amendment to say the amendment to the action that it would be an AMAP's work session on jurisdictions over.
We have a motion on the floor to postpone. Are you amending your motion to postpone to instead do something different?
Postponing too, because
I think it's reasonable.
yeah,
Reasonable to
I'm going to stick with my motion to postpone for now, and then I'll come back depending or seeing on how that shakes down.
And the conversation on the motion on the floor. All right, hearing none, I think we'll probably go to vote. The motion is to postpone the working group meeting. Take a roll call. Mr. Olds, how do you vote?
No.
Ms. Baldwin Day?
yes.
Mr. Bowen, Dr.
Yes.
Bowen, sorry. And Mr. Downey.
No.
And I'll vote no as well. That motion fails. I think I need a new motion.
I have a new motion for it.
Okay, all right.
So the language, changing the language on item 5B to say the policy committee chair is requesting the PC to set the agenda for the an AMAP's work session on jurisdiction over NSH projects within the AMAP's boundary.
Seconded.
By Dr. Bowen, seconded by Ms. Baldwin Day.
Hear the motion one more time.
So it may need to be amended further with
Workshop.
the topics, but for now, what I got is the action requested would be changed to read. The policy committee chair is requesting the policy committee to set the agenda for an AMAP's work session on jurisdiction over NSH projects within the AMAP's boundary.
And then seconded. Is there any conversation?
I guess if, my understanding, when we look at the letter, which is in our packet, the reason why this has the title operating and boundary agreement is because the chain of letters that led to this question resulted from the boundary question. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's based on the letter that we received from the Commissioner of DOT,
Yeah.
which included the operating agreement and boundary.
And I think there is a contention, if it's correct to say, there's a contention by DOT that the operating agreement for AMATs to have control over NHS roads would require a change to the operating agreement.
Yeah, I think we need that clarification.
Which feels like an agenda item for the work session.
So I think that feels like the whole work session could just be that. Again, I'm not interested in going to any other questions on the operating agreement. I like the operating agreement. I think we should keep it as is. If the lawyers want to send correspondence back and forth on the interpretation of that operating agreement, they can do so. But I'm not interested into opening up questions about the makeup of the policy committee or boundaries. You know, if the topic that is at issue here is the NSH or the National Highway System, then we can talk about that. But I just don't feel a need personally as a policymaker to dive into all of the other issues. I think the questions have largely been settled.
I guess I have a potential follow-up question, which is if, and Aaron, maybe this is something you know the answer to, or maybe this is something we'd have to learn, but if we touch the operating agreement, do we need to make the updates to the representation? Do we like
No.
void our grandfather status?
Nope. AMATS has a clause in the operating agreement that you can amend the operating agreement at any time. The only way we have to go to do change the makeup of the policy committee is you volunteer to do it, or you change up the authority of the policy committee, or the makeup, you change the proportional voting membership of the policy committee as well. Those are the two clauses that are spelled out in federal regulation that would require us to redesignate.
And is it not, my understanding is that it's DOT's position that this change would be a change to the authority of the policy committee.
I believe that's what they've stated, yes, but Sean would have to clarify.
You know, and I guess there's also an opinion here that the operating agreement itself requires that it's reviewed once a year by the policy committee, I believe. Then also there's reference in the letter to CFR requirement for a substantial change in decision-making authority or responsibility. That also requires us to update the operating agreement. I don't see how the operating agreement isn't part of the conversation on Monday. Please.
So I have a question. So given what Aaron just said about the policy committee's authority to amend the operating agreement, could an affirmative vote of 3 of the 5 members amend the operating agreement to more explicitly state who has jurisdiction over NSH projects within the AMATS boundary?
I guess so, you know, because the reality is according to FHWA, as they have told DOT many times during the STIP development, from their viewpoint, AMATS has purview over all projects within our boundary in terms of incorporating them into the TIP and the MTP. So in my standpoint as staff, as technical staff, yes, you could, but I don't know if it's needed or not. And so that would be the legal question.
Yeah, that's a legal question. Right? So.
What is the legal question?
But whether you need to do that in the first place or not.
But we could do it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that this letter shows a code that we don't have the authority
To do what? Adjust the operating agreement?
well, no, I think to assert who has control over the NHS or regionally significant projects.
I mean,
I think that's the
that's
question, right?
part of the disagreement is federal regulations state who has authority within the MPO boundary, and DOT has sent a letter saying they disagree with that. So that would need to be the legal question of who's right in that regard, the federal regulation or DOT.
I would also add, I think there is a legal disagreement about whether AMATS exerting authority over those roads is a change in AMATS's authority, or whether that has always been our authority. And if it's a change in our authority, does that require an amendment to the operating agreement? Or is it not a change in our authority that doesn't require? I think that is a point of disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Downey, who are you going to be asking and relying on for input to your perspective on that as a policymaker on that point?
Well, I would say, I think that the purpose of, as I see it, the purpose of the meeting on Monday would be to get in the room and figure out what exactly we disagree on with DOT and to decide whether hiring a third-party counsel is an effective way to negotiate that disagreement, or if we should seek, those of us who are part of the municipality should seek the municipal attorney's opinion, and DOT will seek the Department of Law's opinion, and we'll just have a conflict about it, or if there's a chance to avoid conflict and find common ground. I think that would be my goal. Best case outcome of Monday would be we are able to name our disagreement and find a way to resolve it without a lawsuit.
It sounds like the DOT's disagreement is with the FHWA.
I don't think that's accurate. Yeah.
Well, okay. So then if FHWA has offered guidance that MPOs have jurisdiction over all federally funded projects in their area, including NHS roads, based on the comments and corrective actions offered to our STIB, then it sounds like the disagreement is actually between DOT and FHWA, not necessarily DOT and AMATs.
We have that in writing that they disagreed with that assertion. That
They stated it multiple times at the work session that was hosted by DOT on the 3C process, where we brought up individuals from the lower 48. They stated that their lawyers had told DOT lawyers multiple times during the STIP development that all projects within the MPO boundary have to go through the MPO process.
So the answer is we don't have that in writing. We have it anecdotally in conversation.
Not specifically in those words, no.
So I have a further question, which may be a little bit of a tangent, but so a few moments ago when we were discussing the boundary update. So we've sent the boundary update to DOT, is that correct?
Correct.
And was that by regulation or by courtesy?
Courtesy.
Okay. And so, but we have not yet sent that boundary agreement to the governor, and that is by regulation. That is where the boundary agreement goes from the MPO.
Correct.
Okay.
We were told by DOT the boundary is being held up because of disagreements with the operating agreement, and those would need to be solved first before the boundary would move forward.
Wow.
You know, I'm not going to speak for the governor,
Okay.
but I would assume that the governor would base his decision to sign or not on council of his cabinet, which is DOT.
But the boundary agreement, like this body collectively affirmed the boundary agreement
The boundary, yes, yeah, correct.
with representation from the state DOT.
Correct.
In the minority, you voted to say the minority.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like good faith dealing.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. I really struggle with that, actually.
So if you read the letter, there's a reference.
I did read the letter.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I'd like to make a new motion. I'd like to move to postpone this indefinitely.
Postpone the working group meeting?
Yeah, the item and a working group. For the work session. I assume it's going to be publicly noticed, so the work session.
It is. So. I only have a motion. Is there a second? I'm not hearing a second. So we'll be back to the.
Yeah, you're back to the
Motion.
existing motion. So move to postpone is typically, you can interject at any point, so there's no issue with that. Your current action is where you're requesting to change the action requested to set the agenda for the AMATS work session on jurisdiction over the NHS projects in the AMATS boundary. That was moved and seconded. You were in discussion for that particular action.
As a point of information, point of order, did we vote as a body to have the work session?
You didn't vote, you just discussed it at the March meeting in 25, sorry, feels like eons ago, to direct staff to go ahead and set the work session, but there was no actual vote taken.
Meaning that it wasn't an action item there was no objection.
So what it was is there was, staff brought forward, staff's response to DOT's letter. And during that action item on the agenda, there was discussion about setting up a work session to discuss this in further and how to move forward. But there was no actual vote to be like, you shall set a work session by this date. I believe it was just discussion at that point based on my.
Any further discussion on the motion? And I have a hard time separating the operating agreement discussion. I don't see the harm in having it.
Could you read us the motion one more time?
Move to change the action requested that the PC chair is requesting to set the agenda to an AMATS work session on jurisdiction over the NHS projects in the AMATS boundary.
I have an additional question. it possible to have a representative from FHWA at this meeting?
I can ask, but they have been, I think there is limits on whether they can attend public meetings or not.
Ah.
So I will send a request if you direct me to and see if they can attend.
It'd be pretty short notice.
Moving to vote.
I guess maybe another procedural question is, my understanding for this item is that we were hoping to determine the agenda for Monday's meeting. So I guess would this motion, do we then discuss the agenda after that, or is this motion setting the agenda?
I mean, typically you can only have one affirmative vote on an action item. So if you approve this, you wouldn't be able to then come in with another item and vote.
So to my motion, it's an amendment to this action item.
Yeah, it would, it
And
basically,
multiple amendments, right?
yeah, you can amend this if you want to amend the motion to be like, well, here, we want to amend it to say the agenda. My understanding is this kind of sets the agenda. The agenda is to talk about,
Sorry, but you were saying something slightly different. Remember, Roland was saying he's moving to amend this memorandum,
oh, okay,
The action requested.
okay,
Yes.
yeah, sorry.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know how we don't typically do that, so I don't know how it is, to be
so
honest.
essentially. Okay, do we need to go back in time then and do a move to approve and I can make mine an amendment?
That might be
Okay.
better. I'm sorry to be a pain.
Working that in assembly process.
Right?
It might be better.
So I guess if it's chair's okay with it and the rest of the members are amenable, I will move to approve this item in its original form.
withdraw your other motion.
Sure, I think
Probably
it's
cleaner
it's
that
moved
way.
anyway, but yeah, sure, that withdrawn and then I'll move to approve this with the language as is.
Well, what could you, because the action,
Somebody second it, we'll vote, and then I can make an amendment. Okay, great, and then I would like to make an
And
amendment.
I have further
well,
questions.
I guess I'm unclear on what the motion is, because the action requested is that the PC set the agenda.
And now I'm going to
Okay.
make my amendment that it says, an AMAPS work session on jurisdiction over NHS projects within the AMAPS boundary. I would enjoy the second that I had before.
Second.
Okay.
Moved, seconded, so we're open for discussion.
And I will just say, I want to start there. And then I was thinking we could get into specific agenda items as amended by other members.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see the utility in going through more specifics until we had agreement on that point or not.
I think this is better procedural posture. Thank you.
Thank you for me. I'll help a little bit more.
And also to clarify, so the purpose of your motion is to take the operating agreement off the table as an item of discussion.
Confine the conversation in the work session purely to the disagreement or differing interpretations, I'll say, over who has jurisdiction over the NSH projects.
And I guess maybe this is more of a statement than a question, but to the degree that that question implicates the operating agreement, would you be comfortable discussing the operating, like to the degree we disagree about whether that requires a change to the operating agreement, could that be on the table?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that as a policy committee member, I will share that interpretation or support, but it's something we can talk about.
So that being in the title of the working group meeting doesn't mean that we necessarily have to change the operating agreement.
Yeah, I'm just not interested in having a conversation right now with DOT on elements of the operating agreement, such as the makeup of the policy committee, and disputes over boundary. I think maybe there's a conversation to be had over our interpretations of the operating agreement as pertains to the National Highway System projects, but other than that, like I just don't find the other stuff. I would say let the attorneys duke it out. But it sounds like we're not going to arrive at consensus, and it sounds like DOT is not willing to accept the opinion of outside legal counsel as binding.
I guess I'm hesitant to foreclose on specific topics of conversation because I think one of the values of the conversation on Monday is for us to put a finer point on what exactly the legal question we need an answer to is. I would say that would be sort of the first agenda point was what are the legal questions we want answers to? And I think DOT's position, maybe they have legal questions about the operating agreement or about the way that authority interacts with the operating agreement. And I'd like us to just be able to have that conversation. I agree with you, Member Ball. I don't want to revisit the voting membership or the scope of the operating agreement, but I think the purpose of Monday is to put a fine point on the legal question, and then decide how we answer that question. So I think I'd just be disinclined to take topics off the table. I think it's useful to give us sort of have a primary purpose to the meeting, but that'd be sort of my position.
Any other discussion? So we're voting on the motion to change the action requested. And I will take a roll call. Mr. Olds, how do you vote? And a yes vote would be to change the action to, I guess it's omit the operating agreement from the title of
Yes,
the
to just be
conversation.
specific to AMAT's work session on jurisdiction over NHS projects in the AMAT's boundary.
No.
No, Mr. Downey,
No.
Ms. Baldwin Day,
Yes.
Dr. Boland. Yes. And I'll vote no. We're back to our original motion. Right?
I have a procedural question. How are we going to set how do we go about setting an agenda for this work session that is both complete enough to cover the topics that need to be covered, but also narrow enough to keep us focused on the crux of the issue? And how do we do that in Robert's Rules of Order with, yeah, I'm interested in the mechanics here and would welcome your insight, Mr. Lanillan.
I would recommend you could do, since you have a main motion on the floor to approve the item as is, you can maybe do an amendment to it to say, here's what we want the agenda to be. And say, these are the topics that we want to talk about at the meeting. And if you all agree upon it, that's what we will provide to you as staff in a agenda format when we get to the meeting. I do want to let you know, the meeting's already been posted publicly, so we can't change that at this point. So we won't go back and repost the agenda for everybody. We'll just make it available for you at the meeting of what you decided here are the topics that you want to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, well, I might make a motion if I may. I would move to make the agenda for Monday's meeting to be first answering the legal questions raised in the letter from Commissioner Anderson to AMATS on February 25th, including the question over AMAT's authority over National Highway System roads and roads of regional significance, and whether that is an expansion or the status quo of AMAT's existing authority. Second, to decide whether it would be valuable to hire outside counsel, including the cost and scope of that. And third, what would happen from the results of that legal analysis, including whether it would be binding on DOT, the municipality, and AMATS, and how it will be presented to AMATS.
We hear a second to that motion? Can I second?
As the chair, yes. Technically, you're a voting member.
Maybe Mr. Olds would be interested in seconding.
Second, yeah.
Moved by, thank you, Jason, moved by Mr. Downey, seconded by Mr. Olds. Or any conversations, any modifications?
I just want to be sure that I'm clear. So topics covered would be legal questions raised in the February letter, retention of legal counsel, and then what were the other items?
So it's answering legal questions raised in the letter from the Commissioner Anderson
Sorry,
to AMATs. I'm reading the motion, the motion, just to make sure I got it all.
I say defining the legal questions.
Okay, sorry, it said answering. So
I don't think we'll have answers.
defining the legal questions raised in the letter from Commissioner Anderson to AMATs, including questions over AMAT's authority of NHS roads are regionally significant, and if that is an expansion of authority or existing authority, whether to retain legal counsel and the cost of that, and then what would happen with the legal results, and how will that be binding on MOA, DOT, AMATs, and how will it be presented to AMATs?
Any other conversation? Going to take a vote on that motion to set the agenda. Yeah, how do you vote, Mr. Downey?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Ms. Baldwin Day,
No,
Dr. Bowen. No. And sorry, Jason, Mr. Olds.
Yes.
I think our agenda is set. We can move on to the next action item. And we are at stop at 3.
Yes.
So we'll see where we get here. Under the next action item, which is 5F is the last action item. Do we have an item brief for that, Aaron?
Yes, I'll do a quick overview of this. Sorry, just a second, let me get over to it. Okay, so as you may recall, on July 1st, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation released a letter outlining a new initiative called the Safe Roads, Safe Arterials for Everyone Through Reliable Operations, Distracted Reducing Strategies, called for DOTs to work in cooperation with MPOs to use available safety data, analysis, and assessments to develop a list of arterial segments, including intersections with the highest safety, operational, or compliance concerns that'll be addressed by the end of fiscal year 26. DOT has developed a list and is asking AMATs to review it and provide feedback. So staff reviewed this list and we only had 2 things that we wanted to comment on. One is we're asking DOT to provide more clarity. Oh, actually, I should go through the list. Sorry. Let me go through the list so you're not like, what is this? Well, can you switch over to the PDF that? Thank you. So before you, this list here, it's broken down into a couple different segments. First is the HSIP high crash screening location. So these are all the roads that are, part of the HSIP high crash locations. Staff did review this one and everything's in alignment with what we have in our safety plan and our high crash network map. They're in a little bit different order than what we have. And it looks like this has been ordered based on crash cost per mile. But all the roads are the same. Just know that this list is not just limited to Anchorage roads, it is statewide. So that's why it is pretty extensive. I will note the vast majority of the lists at the list at the beginning are Anchorage roads. Next section is operations for bridges. So this does list all the bridges through the state and their operational concerns. There are a few in the Anchorage area, and that matches up with information that we have as AMAT staff. Next section is the freight bottleneck locations. So this was reviewed by Leafy to see if it matched up with our freight mobility study. It does match up. I will note that there are some differences, but the differences are that some projects have been completed since the freight mobility study was done. So that's why some of those roads don't appear on this freight bottleneck list. And then lastly, there's a section for congestion, operations related to congestion. It looks like congestion criteria was level of service D or worse for 8 months or more, as they say, a majority of the year. So you can see that DeBar Road, Boniface Road area has 12 months of LOSD. One of the questions AMAT staff had or a request of DOT is provide more clarity on this operations metric used. Is that level of service D for every hour of the day, once a week, once a month? What triggers getting a project or a road added to that level of service D? Because if it's once a day, well, does that necessarily mean that it is a serious area if it has level of congestion D for once a day? And is that once a day only for 10 minutes? Is it an hour? What exactly, makes it fall on this list? Some more information would be appreciated to see there. Other than that, staff's recommending the policy committee review this and approve it or recommend support of it to DOT for their efforts. Thank you.
You, Aaron, are there any questions or comments from the committee?
I guess I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. I saw, not in this memo, but maybe Aaron, you emailed it to us, a presentation or a PDF document from DOT that describes some of the strategies that are going to be used on these roads. Are we also approving of those strategies, or are we approving prioritization of these roads?
No, all you're approving is just the list of information that you see in front of you. The email I sent you out, I think, is a separate effort that DOT is doing. I was not aware of it, so I just wanted to provide it to you all. But this list in front of you, the safe roads thing, is what's required to be coordinated with on the DOT. That other effort didn't have the same requirements. So the approval today or support for today is just these lists that you see in front of you.
What about the list are we approving or supporting?
That you agree that this information is correct. Or that you support their efforts in reviewing this list, what you see before you. This is kind of new for us. We've never actually had anything like this. So if it doesn't seem like the action item makes sense, you're welcome to adjust it as needed. This was our attempt as staff to get something that we were sent pretty last minute on the agenda.
Well, I mean, always welcome earlier coordination with DOT, but maybe someone from DOT could talk about the value of AMATs approving this list.
Do we have anybody online? Is Lauren, are you online?
I'm here.
Can you help us out a little bit, please?
Sure. As I understand it, the question right now is AMATS's approval. What does that mean to DOT? Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, approval. What does it
Yeah,
mean
what's
to
the
approve the
value?
list, and what value would that have for you all?
Yeah, so I don't know that we necessarily need an approval. Really, the ask is, so that the list was generated from data sources. I can certainly provide a little context of how we picked the categories we did, but just broadly, the ask was identify safety and operational challenges on your non-freeway arterial network. And so we use a variety of data sources to generate that. The letter directed coordination with the NPOs. So that's part of why we're sharing it, but also you guys know your areas well. If you feel like there's areas not represented, one of the things we did screen was removing collector routes. So if something doesn't, there's a chance that we accidentally hid the wrong row. Those are the kind of things like at FAST, they brought up, hey, we don't see Badger. Well, it turned out Badger was on there, but that's sort of they know their area really well. They know there's problems. And we just want to make sure we have a comprehensive list. We deliberately did not screen this list to say we're only going to put the top 10 safety locations on our list. Right now, we want to show all the areas where we see safety and operational challenges and develop the plan to address those over the next year. That's where we would be saying, okay, here's the issue, here's a potential strategy to resolve that. The initiative does not come with additional funding. It's a voluntary program at this point from the latest FAQs. But obviously we do want to, as always, bring attention to safety and operational challenges on our facility. And we'd like the MPO's engagement, whatever form that looks like for you guys in terms of making sure we have a comprehensive list and approach to ensuring public safety and smooth operations on the arterial network.
Any other questions, comments, questions for Lauren, please?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just don't really know enough about this proposed program, Safe Roads National Initiative. I mean, it talks about, traffic control devices, crosswalk and intersection markings. I like that. But then orderly use of the right of way that is kept free from distractions. It talks about sort of in the same letter, both safety needs and mobility needs. And sometimes I worry that those two things are be at odds, depending on how we plan certain projects. So is there like an opportunity to hear a presentation on the types of interventions that Safe Roads seeks to fund or promote?
Do you have an answer for that, Lauren?
Yeah, so right now, the initial ask, which was the first 60 days, was the identify the challenges, right? That's the initial list. The next ask is what do you think should happen to resolve these? There's no specifics on what they would consider eligible, because again, it's not an additional funding source. It's not, okay, like HSIP, now we've got to make it fit the HSIP criteria. It really is drawing attention to the fact that an overwhelming majority of our fatalities nationally are occurring on these non-freeway arterial routes. And a lot of that is exactly what you're talking about. We have a lot of different user groups trying to use the same facility in very different ways. And it's just drawing attention to that and asking state DOTs to look at these things and put our thinking caps on with the ultimate goal of saving lives. And so what that looks like is going to vary road by road, intersection by intersection. I would expect in the future plan that we're going to be developing over the next year.
Lauren? Any other questions, comments?
I might. I think I see in the letter from DOT a desire to, in the third paragraph, for the state DOT to use available safety data analysis and assessment to develop a list of arterial segments with the highest safety, operational, or compliance concerns. And highest to me suggests probably a shorter list than this. I mean, not that we don't have a lot of problems, but I think I'd like to see clear prioritization and perhaps a shorter list, especially given the target being making improvements by the end of 2026. So some sense of maybe this is just the first step and that prioritization happens next, but I'd like to see that happen. So I guess I don't know if I need to make a motion to record that.
I think it could be part of the conversation. We can pass that on. If you do want to include that in there, we can pass it on as a comment from the policy committee as part of it, if you guys approve this or whatever action you take on it.
I guess that maybe I would move to add a third comment that we request that DOT prioritize the list and bring it back to the policy committee as a prioritized list, as well as I think to Member Volan's comment to present further information about what changes we're likely to expect on these roads by the end of 2026.
And Lauren, what's our due date for submittal of this?
So the initial list is to be submitted to Federal Highways at September 2nd or 5th. There's been a lot of dates for various things lately, but very, very beginning of September. And I will say to some extent, this list is prioritized. So the HSIP screening will only flag roads that have a fatal or 2 serious injury crashes. So there is already a threshold established on the safety list there. It's not every arterial segment in Alaska. It's the ones that would require an assessment under the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And then another point of clarification, addressed by the end of FY26, we have received clarity from Federal Highways that simply means a plan, not any physical changes. So the plan could be, we need to conduct a road safety audit here. That would be an acceptable plan. And yes, we would be setting more of that prioritization. I could envision as we work through this, maybe we set some goals like 10% reduction in serious crashes on our arterial system over the next 5 years. And maybe that kind of helps us prioritize from the plan what we tackle first.
I guess as a procedural point, I think I made a motion. Do we have a second?
We're not at that yet. We still have to do, I think we're just
Oh,
questions. We have to do
thank you,
public
thank you.
comment and then go back. So
Then we can make a motion. Thank you.
Yeah, is that a reasonable request, Lauren, at this point in our, I guess, in our interaction with the USDOT on this? I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that the committee would like to have more information, have a presentation, but it probably would be once some of this stuff is more sorted. Is that? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
sorry, Sean.
No, go ahead.
We absolutely plan on engaging more as we look to develop action plans, prioritization for actual work. That's absolutely going to be continued engagement with the MPOs in working through that, as well as some of the local governments outside the MPO boundaries as well.
I'm sure we have treatments planned for a lot of these routes, probably, but not all of them. And I'm not sure what stage any of those are in. Any other comments, questions from the committee? Not hearing any comments from the public. Not seeing any. Do I have a motion?
I actually, sorry, this is Anna Boson, Regional Traffic Engineer. A point of question for Lauren. I did see that there was the commissioner submitted a plan is on Alaska's action plan, the safe roads in a press release. Is that the plan, or is there a different plan that we're talking about?
No, that's a totally separate, but obviously complementary effort. This was some confusion at FAST Technical as well. Obviously, Safe Roads is a really great acronym, and it certainly plays into that. But I don't believe that Plan 1 is specific to arterials, and 2, it is currently much more Anchorage focused as a result of the work you guys have been doing through the Vision Zero efforts, and it's based more on that. It does expand statewide some of those ideas, but that is not the Safe Roads Action Plan in response to Secretary Duffy's request. That's a complementary effort, but currently independent.
I guess I'll make a motion to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Any objections to postponing indefinitely? Hearing none, it's postponed indefinitely.
Great.
So that's the end of our action items.
there's only one other thing I wanted to quickly mention. The rest of the information items we will delay to another meeting. I just wanted to let you know that the policy committee meeting in September is canceled at this point. The reason is we're going to be doing a work session on the TIP. The 27 through 30 TIP is anticipated to get, or we're working on it right now. We have a work session planned for September 4th from 1 to 3 in the Elmore conference room where the TAC normally meets. We will send that information out to you all as we get a little bit closer. Staff is working on that and the TIP, and we really want to get your guys' kind of initial feedback on the recommendations we have as staff of what projects should be included in the next TIP. So excited for that. That's all I had, sir.
We got like 3 or 4 minutes left. Is there anything else on the agenda that we have to?
We'll do really quickly. We just wanted to let you know that we submitted, the AMAPS Community Advisory Committee submitted comments on the rec trails plan. This is a little bit different than we've done it in the past. We sent the comments directly to the project team with the note that they came from the Community Advisory Committee, not the policy committee. And we're just providing you an informational item that we sent those comments forward. Historically, we would come to the policy committee for approval before we sent them. That caused delays where we would often miss the comment period. So we're going to try something new and see how this works. So the comments are on the agenda for you to review and see if you have any questions or comments or concerns about them. We can bring this informational item back at another meeting just to get you guys to talk about it if you have any questions or anything like that. So that's it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Any objections to adjourning? Not hearing none. Adjourn. Thank you. And apologies to everybody that came prepared to present.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
Didn't get a chance.
Thanks for your patience.